D's nuts.
Okay, see, this better be good. Again, this is what I tell you every time.
If your name is D's nuts and you're paying $10, don't waste it. BYU says their D-line has improved stopping the run in practice. But this is the same D-line that gave up an average 180 yards a game against an O-line that was probably the worst in the Big 12. Well, again, Deion Sanders, let me explain to you that Jay Hill and that defensive staff, and Kalani Sitake is a big part of it, obviously, their development on the D-line, but also their linebackers. And the fact that you're losing a guy like Max Tooley, who's balling out, by the way, for the Houston Texans. You medically retired Ben Bywater, which sucks.
Yes.
But you have depth and quality, and you're faster at the linebacker position, and your safeties are playing downhill. Their run defense will be significantly better this year because they're deeper and they're more talented. A lot of people believe that D-line stop the run. Nothing could be further from the truth. Are they critical to stopping the run? Of course they are. But you look at the best run defenses in the country. They have great linebacker play.
Yeah.
They have great linebacker play.
Disciplined linebacker play.
Well, and disciplined defensive end play.
Yeah.
Disciplined, like gap integrity is a huge part. Like, it's not enough to be talented on the D-line. We saw this with Michigan last year. It's not that Michigan was talented. They were well coached and disciplined.
Yeah, you never had a time at Michigan last year where your defensive end allowed the edge to get, to not,
or
to
that
not
your D tackles, depending on what technique they're playing, but your D tackles are just giving up their gap and freelancing.
Yeah.
That's not how you win football games. The difference at BYU this year is you're more well-coached. It's year 2 of Jay Hill's system, and you have better depth than you have had in some time.
And I also think that that's where appreciating what a good offensive line can do for you gets lost on a lot of college football fans. Like, the defensive line understands what they need to do to slow the run down, right?
Yeah,
they understand,
totally
hey,
agree.
like, we got to feed the back to our linebackers, and if we do that, we're going to hold these guys to 1-2 yards carry. But if the offensive line is able to move guys and open up gaps, that's when you get in trouble because the back has more space to operate against a linebacker. And unless you're Texas this year, most college football teams have pretty damn good talent in the running back room that's going to beat a linebacker one-on-one. You have to have that to be successful.
Yeah, and I think when you look at BYU's an interesting example here because if Gerry with a G wins that job, I think it's very bad for BYU. I think that Jake Retzlaff is the prototypical winner at college football. His skill set, his size, his ability to run, his ability to pass, which is set up by his ability to be mobile outside the pocket. All of those things are critical. His chemistry with the offensive line, I think you got to keep LJ Martin healthy. I think that goes without saying. But Gerry Bohanon has, for long stretches, looked like the better quarterback at camp. But I think Jake Retzlaff has also closed that gap significantly. And if we do get a decision that tomorrow or Saturday, I would be very disappointed if it was not Jake Retzlaff. Because I look at a guy that is ready to run this team for 2 years. That's Jake Retzlaff. Gerry Bohanon's never going to play another college football game after this season. And I think we know who he is. And the argument, BYU fan, that somehow, well, Jake was terrible last year. Who could have been good in that system last year? Who could have been good? When you look at the turnover on the offensive line, you look at the injuries they seemingly have every year on that offense. You look at your best receiver pretty much playing like 3 snaps, Cody Epps, not playing a lot of the year, and his inexperience, and yet he still had them in position to win games down the stretch.
Yeah, that's the thing I think you take away from last year is even with the criticism of the defense, even with the offensive woes, you're still, you're still pushing Arkansas at their place to the limit, bro. Like you're in, like they were in a ton of these games last year. Now they had some games that they lost that I don't think even last year they should have lost, but you were in pretty much every game. And that's where I say, hey, like at what point do we depart from the idea of, hey, we're going to have our quarterback be here one season, then he's going on to the league? Like, when do we get to have, a guy be here at least 2 years, be the guy, put the quarterback conversation to bed so we can focus on, a better offensive line player. We can focus on this or that. Like, that's what the great college football teams don't have to deal with. Ohio State doesn't have to deal with that, right? Like, Texas doesn't have to deal with that. Utah's not dealing with it. Yet here we are, and you want to have your OC constantly talking about, oh, well, we're going to let the team decide. Well, I'm not a big fan of that philosophy. It shouldn't be we're going to let the team decide.
Well, I think what he's saying is it will, and I agree with A-Rod and Kalani on this. It will, the race will win itself. One of these two quarterbacks will outperform the other. And at long stretches, it's been Bohanon. But I think you've seen more than enough from Jake Retzlaff to understand that he's your guy. If he continues to get beat in the daily, I mean, I think we all knew that if you looked at this team closely at all at BYU, you knew that Jaron Hall was the best quarterback in camp. You knew that. I don't think you have that feeling. There isn't enough separation between Bohanon and Retzlaff at this moment. There isn't. San Diego State, Glenn, Snapdragon is owned by San Diego State, Monty. Sure. But it's a $400 million project on the surface because what was it? $300 million to build it, $90 million to buy it. Because then they buy the land. San Diego State bought the land that the San Diego County Credit Union Stadium was built on, right? Like, so you paid $90 million for that land. It was $300 million to build it. And then you had all overruns. It's like a $400 million project. And it only seats 35,000 people.
Yeah.
So when we talk about Snapdragon, you have debt load on that. You have a really good partner on it with Snapdragon. But you have a situation when I talk about football, 35,000 seats for a Super League caliber program is tiny. That's a corner at Bryant-Denny Stadium. And then on top of that, and they've done a great job. I think it needs to be said. They've done a great job with, they've had a ton of soccer there. They've had lacrosse there, rugby there. Like they put a lot of really good events in there. 35,000 seats is a baseball stadium. It's not a football stadium.
Right.
And I think that will be a great example of San Diego State doesn't have the self-generated revenue, in my opinion, to compete at that level. I mean, it just, I don't know what is, if you look at Rice-Eccles, right? And Rice-Eccles Stadium, I think seats, it's like 50, it's like 50 something, 52,000, 51,444 after the expansion in 2021. You're talking about 16,000 more seats. I mean, that's 50% more seats, man. That's a lot of ticket revenue. Big Blue Horses, is there a more annoying and diluted fan base than Boise State? Well, maybe Oak State or Penn State fan.
Yeah.
Austin Davis, hello. Austin Davis is the new member of the show. I forgot to change my name back. I'm excited to see what Utah can do in the Big 12. Me too. I truly am. I cannot wait for Oak State, Utah. I think that's one of the biggest games of the year. I'm going to fire up the smoker. At my house, I am going to have a TV outside. I don't know how I'm going to do it. I'm not sure. Maybe I'll try to find, Mrs. Monty doesn't let me spend money anymore. But I am going to find a roller stand, like one of those.
Whoa, you're going to join the roller crew?
Shut up. I'm going to get one of those roller stands for a TV outside. I have a hot tub. I have really nice patio furniture. I have a full golf setup in my backyard. Yeah. I have a Traeger. I'm doing it. I don't give a rat's ass. I'm doing it because fall football is amazing. And Oak State, Utah, there are some games this year. Oregon, Ohio State, massive game. Massive game.
Game of the year
Fired
written
up.
all over it.
What's your thought on Isaac Wilson as the backup quarterback at Utah? I think that's what you needed, isn't it? Isn't it, Austin? I mean, if he doesn't win that backup job, my biggest concern again, I understand I've sat here and filleted Kyle Whittingham for years on end, but his biggest Achilles heel has been the quarterback position.
Yeah, well, he came out, I think, Monday and said, it might have been Tuesday, and said that Isaac had, secured it currently. So
he earned it.
Yeah, I don't look. I think Isaac Wilson is somebody much like the BYU Retzlaf thing. Utah needs another guy to come in and be there for several years, and I think that Isaac Wilson. The cool thing with this kid is he does have the bravado, but he's incredibly athletic, and that's one thing with Cam Rising that he wasn't gifted with. I don't think that Cam is. You're never going to see Cam out here trying to compete for the fastest 40-yard dash time. That said, he's fast enough to get the job done. So when I look at Utah and I look at the Big 12 and I say, okay, let's presume Utah wins the Big 12 this year. Cam and the fellas move on to the NFL. Okay, great. You got to reload. Okay, well, you're in a really strong position now. And presuming that Isaac Wilson sees the field, let's say 5 games this year, maybe. That's going to be helpful. He needs that development. And yes, if I'm Kyle Whittingham, if I get ahead on one of these teams, if I'm up 25 in the fourth quarter, I'm putting Isaac Wilson in the game.
I want Cam Rising and Brant Keithy to be healthy the entire season.
Yeah.
Every rep.
And I do think part of that is taking care of them and understanding, hey, like if these two dudes are healthy, we're college football playoff good. We're compete at the top of college football good because of the defense. So if we can just keep these two guys healthy, we got a shot. And that's, I'm telling you, you're going to see load management come into play if they can get out in front of some of these softer teams that they will see on the schedule at certain points.
Yeah, I think it'll be very interesting to see and look at that, Ross Dellinger. Next week in Dallas, commissioners from the Group of 5 will gather to discuss pressing issues, including a reshaped G5 postseason incorporating the Bulls.
It's not rocket science.
I can only sit here and tell you I wear a size 15 shoe.
Yeah.
I know things. I just know things. I'm telling you, the G5 does not want the Super League. And
well, they can't absorb it. They it's not like, I agree they don't want it, but it's not possible for them to do it financially.
And I think there's very few situations. What Glenn and I are talking about with Snapdragon or Albertsons in Boise, like I think if everything broke perfectly, Boise State would be right on that line of, well, we won't lose so much money that we can't afford to do it. But there's just not the infrastructure in place to be like, oh, it's a cash cow for us. We have to do it.
Is it worth it for Boise State as an institution to force it financially to get into the Super League just to lose pretty much every game? Because that's what you're talking about. You need to understand that. If schools like Boise State are going to try and jump into the Super League, you're talking about playing a team that is better than you every single week. Yeah. So what's that going to do? Well, that's going to drive your ticket sales down. That's not.
But it's an interesting point, though. Will they recruit up? Will they be able to recruit up? And I don't think they will. You don't have, like San Diego State, there's no better place to be a college student than San Diego.
Seriously.
It's not just Wales vagina, friends. Like it is. That's a great place to go to college. The weather's good. The chicks are amazing. The food's amazing. The view's amazing. The beach is amazing. LA's right up the road. Like, it's amazing. But that's not the case in Boise. I'm telling you, if you've never been to Boise, it's in the middle of nowhere, bruh. Like, it is There's not a lot going on.
Yeah, you just kind of are driving down the road and Boise just kind of shows up and you're through that town in what, 10 minutes? 15 minutes maybe?
What I'm pointing at is it's a small market. It's not like you're going to have access to the best players in the country. It's just really difficult. And you don't play basketball at a high level, in my opinion, consistently. And again, I can go back to, I've talked about on this show for years now. College basketball revenue is vitally important. It is, I think, especially now in the Big 12 model, which I think is the model for business in college basketball. It's got to be a revenue generator on a big scale. It's no longer an afterthought. Utah's a great example of this. The running Utes have to get back to the business of winning basketball games. BYU basketball has to get back to winning basketball games. San Diego State is already winning basketball games at a very high level. They've got tournament shares for years now. Look at Houston. Look at the infrastructure of basketball that is in and around the Big 12. And I am telling you, it is the reason this conference can compete, because they're making big, fundamental, foundational changes in the way they do business. And basketball is a huge part of that. Let's see. Who else? Tanner Plummer. BYU is just setting themselves up for embarrassment when they talk that way. They need to show it on the field. Narratives don't win games. No, they don't. Charisse. Jim Harbaugh is the biggest liar and cheater I've ever seen. Go Bucks. Oh, but Monty, Jimmy's coming back to the big house. He's going to be our captain for a game, and we're gonna buy him cheeseburgers.
I love how that flew under the radar, dude. That he's no longer coming back.
What do you mean he's not coming?
Oh, so you mean to tell me that he's going to use the Chargers as an excuse not to show his face at the stadium?
But he's our guy.
Yeah.
Monty, that's bullshit.
Those kids were hungry, bro. He just brought him a cheeseburger, dude.
Yeah. Okay.
They got to eat.
Okay. Trust me, they ate.
Scott of Greywater Watch. Monty, would your show make the Super League of Sports podcast? I don't know. We don't do a podcast. You're not as big as Bill Simmons, Dan Lebitard, Dan Patrick McAfee. Okay. I'm not saying that I am. I'm the G5 of shows. Great. I don't give it.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah.
Michigan was extremely well coached, but they did have something like 13 players drafted, right? And they also had signs.